Do not fall for the trap of thinking that voting for Restore and thus splitting the right wing vote will be the end of Britain. Now, you often see Reform bring out this kind of cope to get you to stop voting for Restore and vote for them. The basic premise is that if you vote for Restore, it's going to split the right wing vote, as there'll be a fractured base going for Tories, Reform, and Restore, and Green Party will take over. And that will spell the end because obviously the Green Party is crazy. I don't think anyone on this watching this channel would disagree with that. However, this assumption is fundamentally wrong. And it's fundamentally wrong for a couple of reasons, but we're going to go over in this video. The first reason that this is wrong is the Green Party are not capable of winning an election, even with a ridiculously fractured right-wing vote. The second point is that the most likely party to win with a split right-wing vote would be Labour. And the third point we want to make is also that it's no longer about, it has to be that we vote on principle now. We cannot give any support to a party like Reform or Conservatives. The vote has to be anti-establishment. Now, the first point we want to make is, of course, that the Greens aren't capable of winning an election. They are admittedly on a bit of an upswing. They are getting support in major cities and from the left of the UK that are kind of disenfranchised with Labour. And that is because the Green Party are anti-establishment. They are threatening the kind of status quos of the current regime, be it through different means than we might want. And they are also anti-Israel. So they're able to gain the support of all the Muslims in this country. However, when it gets to the national stage, this will not be able to win a nationwide election. It is one thing winning a by-election in a heavily diverse area of a city like Gorton and Denton, and another to get, a vast majority of voting districts in the UK to actually vote for you into power. As the Green parties grow and as we get closer to election time, their crazy ideas are going to get exposed more to the public. People will then start tactically voting against them as they see them to be a radical threat. And this is also a big part of British politics, as left-wing parties traditionally have to tact right. The kind of average median voter in the UK is probably kind of a centre-right person. That's why, if you are a Labour Party, you have to kind of concede to them. The Greens aren't going to be able to do this, as their whole voter base now is on them being radically left-wing. They can either betray their values to get votes to get them in, which will lose the same people that are radically supporting them. So they're in a bit of a pickle in that sense. The other big issue is, of course, that Labour will be able to combat them more effectively. We'll get onto that point shortly.
Another thing I wanted to add as well, Christian Bro, is that what's currently happening with the Green Party is that they've found their tribe members. They're the ones who are willing to scream the loudest for them and support them. However, the Green Party hasn't really been exposed to the general UK public. And once they are, we're going to have the mass media and influencers and your average Joe who can talk about politics and calls himself a political pundit, talk about how ridiculous the Green agenda is. And so everything right now that shows as a strength for the Greens is simply because of, I don't want to say they're small, but simply because they have their tribe. They found their quote, small formation. But once they start exposing themselves to a wider audience, the cracks will start to show. And that's another reason why I don't believe as well, Christian Bro, that the Green Party will actually win the next election if the right does split its vote between Reform and Restore.
Yeah, because essentially, if you're putting these radical ideas to the mass public, which I don't think they currently are exposed at the moment, I think if you're in that space, you are definitely going to vote for Greens. You're aware of the movement. However, again, your kind of undecided voter hasn't been made aware of this. I genuinely predict it would take one BBC debate of having Zach Polanski there saying something ridiculous that could get clipped up all over Twitter, put on all the newspapers, to suddenly make people aware of the fact, okay, hang on, we cannot let this group get in. So the very worst for the Greens, they'll either be tactical voting across the board to stop them getting in, or they just won't be able to appeal to that median voter base and get in legitimately. Now, the next point we want to kind of address is that Labour staying in power necessarily isn't the end of the world. Now, that sounds kind of controversial. We're certainly not, big fans of this current Labour regime. But there's certain things to say that may make them not seem as bad as they are kind of getting labelled across the internet. Now, obviously, we would much rather have a Restore government than a Labour government. That goes without saying. But the Labour government that we're currently under has reduced immigration flows. They have stopped kind of a lot of the kind of woke social policies. And first and foremost, they're kind of a pragmatic regime. Say what you want about Starmer, I don't believe he has many ideological morals. I think he's purely there as a kind of pragmatic, what is best for keeping this quote unquote regime in power. And that will mean, to at least a degree, sensible policies if we do get another Labour government. Now, this is part of a kind of process of British politics where if you're Labour, you have to kind of pivot right in a lot of your policies so you don't seem radical. And if you're Conservative, you have to pivot left a bit so you don't seem that radical. It's why some of the most radical left-wing social changes happened under the Tories, and some of actually the most conservative changes have happened, ironically, under Labour. But yeah, if we vote Restore and it splits the vote away from the right, and it means getting Labour in charge, I personally don't think this will be the end of the world. As again, Labour will have to concede a lot of ground to appease the right at this point.
Also, we were joking about this earlier, Christian bro. Come on, like StarmerBot's got a couple updates, as you can see. He's got some hardware, software updates. He's even emoting. I've actually seen the guy smile over the last 6 months and show some emotion. So maybe Matt Goodwin is wrong. He's not a robot anymore. He's been upgraded.
He's not a robot.
No.
Well, and he did, and that's the other thing as well. He did stand up to the US on the Iran.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
And that's, I think, case in point, an idea of pragmacy over ideology being displayed by Starmer, right? The ideologically pure regime-coded thing to do would, of course, be support Israel. Let's go send the troops in. But Starmer is clever enough to be aware that that is not going to go down well currently in the current state of the UK. So my point is, if we do get 5 years more of Starmer, I don't think he's stupid enough to then open the gates back in for immigration or allow for more woke stuff to go forward.
100%.
We can put up probably with 5 years more of Starmer.
Yes.
And another good thing is this: the right is always strongest when it's not in power. This is a structural issue with the right. We are always better as a resistance than we are when we actually have the tools of power at our hands. Now, for a growing party like Restore, it's not even the end of the world if they got another 5 years, post the 2029 election. That is the day of the election, yeah? 2029?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Sorry. So if they had another 5 years to even grow beyond then, there's a real chance that they can really seriously become a movement and develop the tools to actually enact change when in power. So that's the kind of the basic point.
Yeah. No, I like that point, Christian. Quickly, sorry to cut you off. I was going to say that, and this leads to another issue that we might have if we did have reform go into power, which is that people would become disenfranchised with the right, and they wouldn't be able to differentiate between a legitimate right and a quote-unquote fake right, such as reform. While if we did have another 5 years of Labour, that could only be beneficial to Restore as they gain momentum behind specific issues, as they react to this decision by Starmer, they react to this decision that they made about US foreign policy, whatever it would be. That would give them more fuel to the fire rather than getting reform into the party, reform into the cabinet, and instead just having, I don't know, I always call him goofy, just some goofy man pretend like he's a right-wing politician. So sorry to cut you off, Christian, but I just wanted to quickly add that point.
No, it's a valid point. And yeah, that's the next, and that leads on smoothly to what we want to finally end on. So let's say we actually take the advice of reform, don't vote for Restore, we vote for reform, and reform end up winning. Now, we've made this point many times on this channel, but reform are not what they promise to be. Reform are just as treacherous, just as demotivated to actually help Britain and are detached from the British people as the Conservatives and as Labour. Reform are there to reform the system. They're not there to remove it. They're just there to reform the system and make it more palatable, make it survive longer. A vote for reform is just the exact same as a vote for Labour or a vote for the Conservatives. You're just voting for the same thing with a slightly different colour of paint on it. Now,
it literally is like a vote for Tories as well, with who they've got on board.
It's literally just a Tory rebrand. You're falling for the same thing if you vote for reform. Now, we have to vote for Restore, first and foremost, just to prove that their message is what the British people want. It doesn't matter if, in the next election, we do get a left-wing party. What will be a bigger growth for us is if Restore can get, second in the polls, perhaps. Show that there is really a serious movement for this type of anti-regime, sensible and, properly committed to returning to what Britain has to be to survive. We have to display with our votes that we want this as the option. Nothing else will do. Do not vote anything else because it's out of fear of the left. We have to vote for Restore because that is the only option that we want on the table.
I agree. And I'd rather get a Mark Carney than a Trump in the UK. Just putting it out there. I'd rather get Labour looking at what Restore being able to do and going, oh, okay, cool. We need to start handling these things. And if they do it in the style of Mark Carney, it won't even be something that gets publicized or something that gets pushed out a lot. It would just be a decrease in migration. In fact, a lot of what's it called? Like a net growth in migration, or sorry, a net deficit in migration, and something that's a lot more pragmatic, something that's a lot more moving forward for the benefits of Canada, rather than a shit show, if pardon my language, like Trump has done with America. So, just saying, putting it out there as well. If Labour did win, and we showed that Restore is a serious movement, there'd be a lot more benefits in the long run than just Trump 2.0, but in the UK.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Reform winning is probably going to be worse for the country than Labour winning. I won't go as far as to say they'd be worse than the Greens, but they probably would be worse for Britain than Labour because they simply would ruin the perception of a right-wing government coming into power. I mean, look what the Trump regime has currently done to American right-wing politics. Democrats are going to absolutely obliterate the Republicans in the next election because Trump has essentially tainted the waters of populism. It's not treated seriously anymore because of what he's done. Reform are probably going to be likely the same. I don't think they're going to deport or let in less than Labour. They'll probably stay at the same rate. I don't think they care enough to implement real kind of social changes. They'll just masquerade, making kind of banal populist statements, and they'll probably also, if they had it their way, get us more entrenched into kind of foreign policy adventures with the US. They will completely delegitimize the right, and they will also end up inadvertently delegitimizing Restore, the genuine message and attempt at change that we want from our side of politics. So yeah, essentially, do not be scared to vote for Restore at the fear of splitting the vote. In kind of summary, the Greens aren't ever going to be capable of winning. If they do, well, they won't. Sorry. If Labour stay in power, it won't be the end of the world. And finally, Reform will be worse for Britain than Labour. Vote purely out of principle and for what we want. And what we want, if you are a serious right-winger that cares about the country that you live in, that cares about the future for your children or for yourself if you're a younger person watching, has to be with Restore Britain.
Agreed. Well, thank you very much for watching. God bless you all. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you in the next video. Subscribe, that way we'll love you, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Take care.